All right, good evening and welcome to the May 2021 Teaching Math Teaching Podcast No Guilt Book Club. We're in our third session. We are talking about teaching math at a distance, a practical guide to rich remote instruction by Theresa Wills. And we're joined by Theresa Wills. So we get you for a whole discussion, and we're excited. And Dusty could not be here tonight, but we're excited to have Theresa and to talk about chapter 7 and 8, where we get to dive into what does it look like to enhance these tasks or these strategies and routines that we already know, and how do we put them into online instruction, and then thinking about what do the 5 practices look like. And I'm excited to have this discussion. But before I do that, Theresa, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Very excited about these 2 chapters. This is the essence of math teaching for me. It's the predictable routine, and then it is the rich, juicy task where we can dive right into something worthy of solving. And these 2 chapters are really all about, hey, I've done this in the face-to-face classroom for a long time. Now that we're online, how do we do it here? And so, it takes a lot of those structures that other people have created and that other people have put out there, and just kind of looks at how do we change the modality and what advantages can we really bring out here.
Nice. Yeah, I'm excited to dive in. But we attempted to do a morning meeting last time, Theresa, as we launched into our do little attendance here. But if maybe I was going to have another question for you, just one of those low risk questions where people, if those that are watching live can answer, and those are not can comment on the video whenever they do watch it. But if you had to pick one musical artist, what would you pick? Who would you pick and why to listen to on a long road trip? Just given context.
Oh, let's see. I'm going to be the interesting person for your morning meeting.
Great.
Believe it or not, I actually don't really like music. And I know that's a very weird thing to hear.
That's okay. Awesome.
I have hyperacusis. So basically that's a hearing disorder that means that you hear everything really, really loud. So loud that you kind of want silence whenever you can get it. So I find, if I have classic rock on, that's usually the one I'll go to. But I actually really enjoy going on a car ride and having it just silent or just chatter, or books on tape. I'm gobbling down books on tape. And so favorite artist, I will pretty much always put on Elton John if I have someone to pick right away. But I'll pretty much go to those classic rock stations.
Nice. Very good. Well, just given that you mentioned it, book on tape, what's one that you heard recently you're and that you're recommending to folks that you'd recommend to somebody else to listen to?
So I listen to a lot of young adult fiction. It is my escape from the real world. I have been playing a lot of books for my kiddos who are in 1st and 2nd grade. And some of the ones that we listened to recently are Hoot. It's about some burrowing owls. And Saving the Planet. We listened to Because of Winn-Dixie. And the really neat thing is, when we're traveling, they will see a Winn-Dixie grocery store. Oh, that's from the book. And, right. Where I am in Northern Virginia, we have a lot of Giant and Safeway, but we don't have Winn-Dixie. Those are the 2 most recent ones. We seem to always go into the Rick Riordan books too. But those are, that's my genre. I'll often go into Hunger Games. I just listened to the brand new one. I think it's The Ballads of Snakes and Songbirds. If you like Hunger Games, that is awesome. But that's my escape. I don't like anything too heavy. I like the stuff that the teens read.
Yeah. My wife and I, when our first long road trip, when we were just dating, we listened to Harry Potter, and that's where we got into it. And we would read it to each other after the trip. On our honeymoon, we were reading Harry Potter to each other. That was kind of fun. So and that was right when they were coming out with, I think, book 4 or 5 or something like that. Not dating
Very
myself,
cool.
but yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, I like that as a escape, but then also too making those connections with your kids. That's awesome. So
And look at those connections we just made too. It just takes a couple of seconds, and now I always got that connection with you.
That's right. Yeah, and my son Rick Riordan is his favorite. He's like into all the, you know, he got into the Norwegian lore and all, like, I mean, all the, I thought it was just, you know, like the Percy Jackson, like, no, like the world is huge. And so, yeah,
right.
loves it. So yeah, let's dive into this. So we're talking about chapter 7, strategies to facilitate common routines online, and chapter 8, facilitating math discourse. And so thinking about chapter 7 and thinking about those routines. And again, what I talked about with Dusty last week, and I show you my tabs on here, tab those beginning in the book. You've created a beautiful table that basically describes all the strategies and all these strategy sections that lists all the strategies that you have in that chapter, with the complexity level, delivery methods, student technology modalities used, interactive slide features, and advantages. And I would say probably if there's templates, you probably have templates on your site, knowing how much material you have available. So, I mean, it's kind of amazing. So I love that as almost like there's a hyperlink to each of these strategies that you go in. So how did you, of all the strategies that you could have put in here, how did you come up with these 5 for in chapter 7?
So there's 2 things that really led me to choosing the routines for this. One of them was this ease of implementing. So I've mentioned it before here. I consider myself, no matter what role I'm in, I'm a math coach. And the nice thing about routines is when you're working with another teacher and we're going to try something new, there's no better place to start than a 7-minute routine. You know, pretty much anyone that I'll work with are like, yeah, you can do 7 minutes of something. And then we kind of get that initial buy-in, and it's like, ooh, this is neat. I want to do this again. So routines, what I look for is something that is that you can repeat, but it doesn't get boring. You know, so these routines are ones that you can do every day for, you know, months if you wanted to. I usually, you know, will do a routine every day for a solid month. And then I might switch it up for another one, just so that the students really get that predictability, and that routine can be there. The other thing that I look for is things that have already been done in the classroom in an in-person environment. Again, it's that accessibility.
Right.
If I want teachers to be able to take something and run with it, we need to be somewhat familiar with it. But if we're not just limited to the couple that are in there, pretty much by the end of the chapter, what I hope that teachers get from it is not so much, here's a couple routines you can do, but here's how you can take something and turn it into a predictable routine for students, and you get all their voices. Not just the kid who likes to use the camera, not just the kid who likes the mic, and not just that fast typer, but everybody gets a voice. And so I really try and bring out those multiple modalities. And what I find is that, you know, kids have a voice in different ways. I've got the kiddo who will just put an emoji in within a half second after any comment is said, and it is on point and it is so funny. And I know right away, like, oh, you just got that because you know the math here. And so there's these different ways that kids can interact. And that's what I love about the technology side of it.
Well, and I would imagine that you've had interactions with anyone that you've interacted with and like have shown like, hey, here's what you could do with that strategy that you already know and use and love in your classroom. I would imagine that you've had some people interact with you like, wow, I didn't have to change everything I did. I just had to think of how to make it better by using some of these sort of models that you've shown. Like, have you had interactions with people around that sort of thing?
Yes, especially with the numberless word problems. That's one that I've been doing a lot in the Mather days. So every Saturday I do a new routine enriched task. We'll kind of get into that. But this routine is ones that people will say like, oh, I use that all the time in the in-person. Now I can do it online. And I just use the same templates. So I do a lot of templates. I put them up on the website and people can just click right on them and then copy and paste a new image in. Another one that comes out is the estimation routines, where like all the kids can put their responses in at the exact same time, teachers will say, oh, that's what I do on whiteboards. I have my students think about it. They write down the number for the estimate and they all hold it up. But the difference with online is, they're all holding it up. They might be looking a little bit at each other, but they're mostly looking at the teacher.
Yeah.
And so online, they're typing it in and they're changing their answer in real time when they get the information from other people. So there's a lot more student to student to student interaction than just student to teacher. But they're all based on that same initial concept of this is a great routine to do in person, and now we can do it online.
Yeah. Well, and I think we might have mentioned this on the first chat, but there's the Courage to Teach by Parker Palmer. He's got this, talks about these different, he's got these two images of a classroom. And one of them is like about the information going down into students. And it's like this, the banking sort of like, I'm going to deposit knowledge into students, but like what you're saying, this, like the online environment. And again, where you're seeing all the different kids can interact in all the different ways, like you are creating this like network where there is the student to student interaction, there's a teacher to student interaction, there's all these sorts of interactions that can happen simultaneously that is facilitating like the kind of classroom that you would want, right? You want, like when I was talking to my student teachers, it's like that student to student interaction is gold. The getting a student to engage with another student's ideas and think about how does it match, or what are the differences, or what can they learn together by platform, playing off of each other. And like again, you're showing like, hey, this model can exist in this online space, maybe even a little bit easier than in a face-to-face environment.
Right, exactly. So, and that comes back in the first session, we talked about the Sammer model. It goes back to that, just understanding what it is that you are substituting. So, if I am just going to have each student open their own personal slide or jam or any of those things, and they send me a number, that's much like that whiteboard of holding up, like this is a student to the teacher. Even if the teacher can see all 25 on a private screen, there's some great advantages there. But that's just mimicking what is done in the face-to-face. And in some cases, you want exactly that. In other cases, you look at, like, is there a way we could do this better? So what you saw in that estimation one with all 32 of those little text boxes is 32 kids simultaneously typing in, hey, I think there's 96. I think there's 24. I think there's 47. They put in all the things that are too low, all the things that are too high, and then they find that one that's just right. And there's a lot of discussion around that too. So any of those routines that do things like that, where we use the affordances of the technology to improve an already fantastic routine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I mean, even just, estimation can be hard, especially for, my son, he's how old is he now? He's 9. Sorry. Too many to keep track of. But like, sometimes you'll throw out a number and it's like, for an estimate of how many things are in something. And it's like, way too low, way too high. But it's like getting him to think like, what is something that is way too high? What is something way too low? And then now we're ready maybe to think about like where it might be. Like I love that as like scaffolding. Like, well, it's easy to go like, a billion gazillion, yeah. But then even like they'll get better and better about doing that. And so I love that as that estimation. And and then now that you have that template, you can do that all the time with different things.
And another routine. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, because then like what's cool too is like, well, now a kid can send a picture in of something else that, hey, I want to estimate how many logs are in this pile, or like how, just anything that they saw a cool picture. Mom snaps a picture. Now they can, send it into the teacher. And now they can participate in this thing and like, oh, that's my log pile, or that's my bowl of Skittles, or whatever, and I've got the answer. And now they're kind of like, leading the charge. I don't know. I love that where like kids can participate in that sort of thing.
Yeah. And that's exactly, so you kind of are foreshadowing one of the future chapters with the homework, because it is exactly that. Whenever I can, let me give the kids the opportunities to take the pictures, to create the curriculum. It's not though that I'm just going to pick out a thing willy-nilly, like, right? I'm going to pick the ones that meet our lesson. So if I see a student using a measuring cup or something like that, it's going to be for the measurement unit. So yeah, that's a great foreshadow there. I also wanted to mention one of the routines in there comes from choral counting. And that's, the beginning part of choral counting is when we are actually all counting together, which is a fabulous routine. But if we're looking at affordances of the technology, when we can color code and put the student's name and voice right next to it. So we'll see things like, this pattern is going up by 2. So we could put a little purple arrow showing that it's +2 each time. And that student can use their voice to explain, this is +2 each time. I don't fix it with my teacher voice. I put it exactly as it is. And then one of the affordances is the next day, we use the exact same one. We cover up some of the pieces and have students use their own repeating of the rule or their own rule. And then we cover up the rule. So we're kind of doing this cover up and then this uncover, but we're maintaining that same feel for the what you would have done in person. And then, we can even have kids go back and now fill in your own or now think about your own pattern. So it's really bringing it back to that student-centered part.
Yeah. And just, plug for it. I mean, seeing the whole example with the, transcript and the images about the choral counting, and then, just even the example that you're talking about with the, how to illustrate these ways that kids are seeing the mathematics, right? The way the kids are seeing this is, that visual thinking is pretty cool to again, allow kids to participate, allow kids to see like, hey, that's, I did that, or I came up with that, or I did, some ownership of things in the classroom. So, but yeah, just even the talking it out. Cause like I was a high school math teacher and like, so I haven't executed choral counting all that much. Like we have done it, some of it in our methods classroom, but seeing what it's like here and then thinking about what that'd be in a face-to-face and now thinking about what it's like in an online environment is a good illustration, especially for those that are doing these sorts of things online. So I again appreciate the writing. So
yeah, so far we've talked about having every single student respond in a text box simultaneously. So there's an advantage. Now we've got the color coding, the copy the slide, the actual student voice all on a slide. That's another advantage of the tech. But then there's another one with the which one doesn't belong situation. So in that case, they were looking at a bunch of different ways of representing, I believe it was 7. And students moved this little doesn't belong symbol. It's just a graphic. They move it to the quadrant that doesn't belong based on their rule. And the cool thing is it's totally anonymous. So we're all simultaneously, all 32 of my students are moving these little things around. But now I've got kids where they could really use some confidence in learning online. So when they see that 6 of their friends picked the exact same quadrant as them, as like this one doesn't belong, that's only going to increase their confidence. Now they're ready. If they're going to call on somebody to explain why this quadrant doesn't belong, it's like, yeah, I'll go because my friends also said that this doesn't belong. I'm not here on my own. So there's this visual anonymity that is an advantage that we just wouldn't get in the in-person. So the selection that I picked here are ones that really bring in those advantages where they really bubble to the surface in very different ways.
When you do something like this, like and again, just to communicate to those that, have not read the book, but like some of the thinking that a task like this, where which one doesn't belong, again, like you said, as long as I can create a reason for why I put my thing and it's true, like I could be whatever. Like, like there's one that I put this doesn't belong because it uses hands. And that was the selection that they put. But like, what is some of the thinking where you're like, oh, wow, that is like, I in all my time of doing that, I wouldn't have thought that somebody would have said that. And that was pretty cool. Like, do you have an example of something like that's emerged from something like this in either which one doesn't belong or any of these strategies, but like where the thinking was like, oh my goodness, like that, the brilliance, because I've opened this up, the brilliance that came out from a child. Do you have any examples of that? Or even
I do have an example. And one of them was we were looking at basically subitizing numbers. So that idea that, if you roll a die and you see the number 5 pop up, you don't have to count all the little pips. You just know it's 5, right? So we were doing that. We had a couple dice. We had, some different designs, and I had a constellation. It was the Big Dipper. So you might imagine there was like 4, it comes over, then there's like 3. There's even a double star in the handle, which is a really cool thing that the kids bring up. And there's some really cool Native American history on that one too, a little bit of an eye test to see if you're ready for a great journey. So it went out into that. But the genius that comes out of the which one doesn't belong task is they had said the Big Dipper doesn't belong because it has so many dots or pips or numbers. And I thought they were just counting the couple in the constellation. They're like, no, do you know how many stars are out there in our solar system? Do you know how many stars are out in our universe? This one doesn't belong because of that. And, as a math teacher, it's my job to get kids to understand number sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for someone to try to explain a number that is so big that we might not have a word for it, and they're in elementary school, is incredible. And so that idea that, in our multiverse, this one doesn't belong because of that. And so we have simple numbers that I can just look at it and know, and then we've got this really abstract idea. So things like that come up. Kids will think of the coolest things, and that one sticks out the most.
Yeah. That reminds me of that, I can't remember what the name of the show is, but like Carl Sagan explaining what a Google was before we had Google, like with the OL, but yeah, like trying to, like, wow, like that was amazing, like that what the kid was able to share. But that's neat. Was there any strategies that you're like, in hindsight, you wish you would have put a different strategy in this book? I know you said it's not the intent is to show all these strategies, but is there one that you would have like, I probably would have, in hindsight, I wanted to include that strategy?
There's a couple that I really have been interested in recently. The would you rather is a great one of putting in. The concept behind would you rather is that you could select either one, but your mathematical reasoning and the way you defend it is how you can have a correct answer. I found a lot of student voice in the would you rathers. And the other one is one that some of the teachers and I have been kind of developing in the Mather days, and it's called like, what could this be? So the idea with what could this be, again, it's really banking on students being in the center, is that I might, put a graph up. If I'm an Algebra 2 teacher, I might put up a 10 frame if I'm in elementary school, and I would just say, what could this be? The idea that graphs, that numbers, that, these story problems can represent lots of things in our world. And if my students are immersed in routines where they have to think about it differently, not like the math teacher answer, but like a different way, they're going to go out in their world and they're going to see a stop sign and be like, what could this be? This could be an octagon. Glad I learned that from, So they're seeing the octagon, and then they're also seeing like, oh, the spacing between the letters. So they're seeing math in their world out there. And I think that brings us to, the next generation of the workforce aren't going to be people who can, spit out the answer. It's going to be people who can look at the answer and say, what questions could this answer? And really think outside the box and think of things differently. So, yeah.
I love it. Yeah. I appreciate, the way that you talked about these strategies initially. It's like, you're going to end up with this mindset of, here's how I could make these things happen. And I can maintain, especially like last year, like when you had to convert and like maintain the integrity of my course. I already have these things going now. How do I just make them happen in just a different modality? And so, and then also too, just the spark that you're giving me and thinking about, these are some things that I need to implement, and I could think about how to do them in a face-to-face environment, but still take advantage of some of the technological advances of, I can see all these responses, or they can see each other's responses. They, just because they're sitting in this group doesn't mean that they can't see someone in that other group over there and what they're doing. So I just appreciate that. I think we should get into the chapter 8, because I think chapter 8 is what I don't know. I was really excited to talk about, and I think that you're setting us up for the facilitating mathematical discourse online through rich tasks. And I like to call them messy tasks. And I know that this is a big part of what you do. And you talked about a little bit about this. So tell us about why you like this chapter.
Yeah. So, gosh, I don't remember the first time that I learned what a rich task really was. But I do know that I liked math growing up when there were word problems. And, I have a lot of trouble remembering things and memorizing things, but I'm really good at deriving them. And I can derive 6 times 7 because I will always do 36 and add on every single time. I'm really good at deriving things. I'm really good at kind of thinking about, will this rule always work? But I'm not good at remembering the opposite of b plus or minus square I, and then it goes out. And so why I really like rich tasks is it will help me to get along with other people who maybe are memorizers. And I will be the one who says, but why does that work? But why does that work? And they'll be the ones to bring that part to. So you see, it brings this collaboration together. And that's when I first realized the importance of we can bring a great problem. We can bring people who learn differently. And because we're together, we're going to do better at this task than we would have done independently. So, a good rich task is juicy, but it also will bring people together. In this task, we were talking about the hopscotch problem in this part of the book. And the idea here is if you've ever played hopscotch, you probably use your right foot for the number 1, and you put 2 feet down for 2 and 3. And your right foot down for 4, and 2 feet down for 5 and 6. Well, if you keep doing this 1 foot, 2 foot, 1 foot, 2 foot, 1 foot, 2 foot, where is the number 100? Is it going to be on a 2 foot? Is it going to be on a 1 foot? Is it going to be where is this one? Does it make sense to end it there? And it was to celebrate the 100th day of school, which is really popular in elementary school. And so the point of this problem was, again, to bring in different people's perspectives, like who's really good at hopscotch, who can bring up the importance of, we got to keep this pattern, who's really good at the drawing of it, who's really good at making a table, who can, think abstractly about this. And when all those different ideas can come together and the teacher can facilitate a really good connection between them, then students leave with such a strong understanding of the topic. So that was the big challenge. Okay, how do we do this in person? And I really reach out to the work of Smith and Stein for this, but really just looking at those 5 practices and then saying, how do we do this online?
Yeah, and I just wanted to jump on that too, because so Smith and Stein, the 5 practices. I guess how just for those that maybe have not read that, it's again, no guilt. How would you describe the 5 practices book from Smith and Stein? Because this is if you've seen it, the big yellow 5 and use purple book, but how would you describe the main thesis of that book?
Yeah. Well, I can even go back into Hufford dissertation, because my dissertation was actually kind of a bit of a follow-up on that one.
Oh, there we go. All right.
And so, it's this whole idea about how do we get people to talk about math? Well, we don't care about stupid tasks, for one. So let's make a good task.
That's right.
And then when we have a good task, let's make sure that there are many ways of solving it and not just the one way, because then we're just waiting for that kid to share. And so, we pick a rich task. We think about multiple ways of solving it. And the 5 practices, that's all step 0, right? That's not even one of them yet. Right. But the key is, and I'll go back to my identity of being a math coach, is anticipating this idea that whatever you give the students, do it first yourself, many ways, so that you can have the time to, go around your class and see the different ways that they're doing it. Because when you have 30 kids in a class,
Right.
And 26 of them are doing them in ways that you anticipated. You can spend time with those 4 others and really figure out what it is they're doing. And you can also spend time questioning students and monitoring and then thinking about how they're doing it. So the 5 practices starts with anticipation. It moves into monitoring, which is moving around the classroom or moving between breakout rooms. You're using your eyes, your ears, you're collecting stuff. And then you're starting to select, which ones am I going to do? I'm going to do this one. And, oh gosh, I love that one, but it doesn't meet my objective today. So I'm going to put that in my back pocket and do that one another week. So you're kind of selecting very purposefully. Then you put them in the order that you want to discuss. Developing some questions that you're going to ask. And then you have the big discussion where you connect those all together. So that's essentially the 5 practices. Many people have used those and attribute those to having great discussions in their math class. And so for me, I've been doing these ones online for about a decade now. And I move between breakout rooms. And do you know how easy it is to be able to listen in, but also see somebody else's work on a slide and see that change and then move to another slide? So I could be in like 3 groups at a time.
Yeah.
And that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I thought the most powerful tool I could have in doing a messy task like these is my rolly chair, which I would roll between the different rooms. But yeah, going in between the Zooms and having the shared Google Slides where you can see things that are happening, that's might be a little bit better than my rolly chair. So like, well, thank you. I mean, it's, I don't know. One of these people watching might be my mother. And so thinking about the kinds of math that maybe people grew up with, you think like talking about math, like we weren't really given that. And just having this difference between, we were given most likely exercises where we were shown how to do something and then you just executed that thing over and over again. And there weren't really problems. They were exercises. What we're talking about is tasks, like the hopscotch task. You said like, where would the 100th tile be? Would it be in the 1? Would it be in the 2? Which side would it be? Like, that is like, like, and there's a bunch of different ways they could solve it. And kids can use all these different assets that they have to solve it. And it's different than maybe what we might have experienced. I know that I didn't experience too many of those rich tasks. I did in computer science when I had to figure out how to write a program to execute something, but so just, it's amazing what can happen. And I think what, the 5 practices also is a way that you're getting a chance to reveal kids' brilliance to each other and to themselves and to you. And like, it's awesome to be able, when you see it done. And again, that's a nice thing about the book, is that the whole chapter 8 is through this whole steps of the 5 practices through the hopscotch task. So I feel like I keep saying like, it's a good book. but I mean,
these
like,
2 chapters were so fun to write, right?
I can imagine.
And there's one other advantage that I really want to get to here in thinking about the hopscotch problem. I'm going to throw a couple of page numbers in here in case we have people watching with this. But on page 168, there is what you could clearly see is somebody copying and pasting. But you'll notice that the hopscotch goes from 37, then there's the 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43. And then you can see next to it, they've copy and pasted those because it's really easy to do online, to group something together and paste it. And then they go in and they start to change the numbers. What is beautiful about that is you can copy their rough draft thinking before they have finished it. So what you're seeing there is that last column, 49, 50, 51, 5. And I'll ask my students, why is there 5 here? And I can tell if a student understands the model because they'll be like, oh, that's going to be a 52. They just didn't finish writing the 2. Great. And so this isn't a wrong answer. This is a beautiful moment of saying like, what's up with the 5 and ensuring that the model is understood by the class. And that's one of those advantages that if I had a kid write it on poster paper and put it up, I'm just not going to get the same feeling because they're going to, make it look nice or they're going to have it finished. And here I can just copy a slide before it's done.
Right. And like almost the fear of like, I'm going to put down something that's not quite right on this beautiful piece of poster paper that I know is expensive, and but to have like, I can make, and like, I love, you have the little red box with like the confidence and messiness, and like, problem solving often includes many rough drafts and messiness. While it might be tempting to organize student thinking, recognize the purpose of the unstructured spaces and show students that you value the messiness. And so we did a No Guilt, or a book club last summer on this one, Rough Draft Math, revised and learned by Mandy Jansen. And like that same idea of these rough drafts are important in thinking about our identifying our thinking, and just having that experience of getting to see kids and maybe in this virtual space, they're a little bit, you can capture those, some of that messiness in places where the rough draft, and pull it out and make a screenshot or whatever. But then also too, that they're not as like, they see it's okay. And like, I mean, just having kids to see that it's okay to make a mistake, or it's okay that, I know where I'm going. I have confidence in what I'm doing, and my teacher has confidence in me too. Those are good messages to have.
Absolutely. I got to give a shout out to Mandy, because what the Rough Draft Math book, and her conversations a year ago here were really, pivotal in me being able to put a lot of the teaching and the thinking that I have on teaching online, and putting it up in its rough draft form. So I've mentioned this a couple times. So every Saturday I host a free PD. And what we do is the first 7 minutes, we do a routine, and then we go into a rich task, and it shows a 1 hour math block. We do it all. And that's just bookended with the building community. And at first I would just kind of do them, and people would come, and then we would finish. But it's because of her book, really, that I started recording those and posting them up in their raw form. So you saw an episode where I disconnected from the internet, and then I popped back on, and you could see what the group was doing. We had one where I learned some really important internet security, a little bit of a Zoom bomb, and luckily nothing bad came out of it. But I learned real quickly about what to do, and I was really proud afterwards when I listened to it, because my tone and my words were calm, which is really important to do as a teacher, right? So you mentioned the importance of kids showing their mistakes to these messy problems or these rich tasks. And when are they going to do it? Only if we show ours. Right. So I've been trying to show those. I'll put them up in its raw form. I don't always have the right answer. I don't always say it right. And we can use that to learn and grow. And so I really thank Mandy for that, because, I can model what I want my students to do.
Yeah. Well, another one too that I really like, and I see a lot of parallels with your book, and again, getting inside the teachers and seeing what they're doing with the students, was Magdalene Lampert's Teaching with Problems and the Problem of Teaching. Again, she did a lot of rich tasks, and with her students, it had a routine for doing it. Again, hers was face-to-face environment, lots of writing. But the thing that stuck out to me that kind of reminds me of this too is like, she would have them use pens. Part of it is she wanted to have access to their thinking, and not wanting them to erase like data, because it was like, this was like her lab. But two, to say the same thing, the same message you're saying, is like, this thinking is good to see. It's like good to see down the path where you came from, like this dead end, yes, led to this thing, led to some thinking of one of your peers, and led to like it's all a part of this history of where we got this solution to, and that we, like, it was socially constructed, right? And so I love that the messiness, we're embracing the messiness, and so I call them rich tasks. I call them messy tasks. So if any student ever sees this, they say, Amidon's talking about messy tasks again. But like these sorts of tasks where, I mean, I could even imagine, I wonder if you've seen this, where doing this task, a kid like stands up and like does counting, but they're doing like hopscotch, like in place, or maybe even across the room or something like that.
Yep.
If you, I'm sure you have. Like,
I have seen the laptop bounce because they're doing this virtually, and you'd think they'd put the laptop down, but instead it's in their hand. They're like, no, that's a 1 jump. This is a 2 jump. This is a 1 jump. And then you'll also see so they'll do it. They will, our virtual learners will literally go outside and get their sidewalk chalk and start kind of doing it, you'll see the little dot, dot, dot. And I'll say, what's that? They're like, that's what the teacher does when we don't want to use all the numbers. Okay. How did you get to the end of that dot, dot, dot? But, all of that comes out of these messy ones because it is, just too far to think on your own. You got to draw something, do something, get the sidewalk chalk out or bounce.
Yeah. And you see all the different, and again, with the resources they have available. And then you see in this problem alone, it's kind of builds up. It's almost like the whole book builds up to this, is that you see, oh, we have access to these different resources to figure out what's the best model for how we're going to do it. And that's part of that, you talked about, like, do this problem many ways to see what might we want to have available, or what to maybe even promote, like, hey, you could use these things to help you do your thinking here. And they've got tables, they've got the line charts, they've got the different squares that they're using. They even have the cube model, like all those different models in order to, again, show their thinking. And what's beautiful is that as a teacher, you're standing back and saying, all right, I'm trusting, and again, like, coming from a very traditional math background, is like trusting that there's something that's going to happen here. Like like, if you give kids the tools and you give them a good task like this, and that they can grasp onto, you're going to, again, the brilliance is going to come out. And that's just, you're just working through the 5 practices to get there and get to your objective, right?
It's absolutely true. And, you mentioned also about trusting these different representations. Well, so my background is I've taught I've taught math to kindergartners. I've taught geometry to high schoolers. And the one thing that comes from that secondary background is the importance of tables. Like, my goodness, I did not understand really their importance until trying to teach Algebra 1, trying to teach them that this graph that you did in this unit is the same as this table you did in the other is the same as this rule here. And what you're seeing in this problem is it might not be an XY coordinate, but they're seeing a number line, and they're seeing these jumps on the number line. A 1 jump, a 2 jump, a 1 jump, a 2 jump, a 1 jump, a 2 jump is the same as a 3 jump, a 3 jump, a 3 jump. And if kids can get that at an early age, just imagine them going into algebra being like, oh yeah, the 1 on this table, I don't need to have the 2 and the 3. I can just go straight to the 4 because I know I'm jumping 2 numbers. But what they're doing is they're making these major abstract connections between the representations. And it's all pre-algebra concepts that we would love for them to have in an Algebra 1 class. Yeah,
and all these different ways of showing their thinking of how they're conceiving of the problem. Because it took me a second to understand some of them. And, like, again, it goes back to anticipating and think, like, well, how might they do this? So the table, they're going from 1 to 4 to 7 to 10, and all they're doing is showing, like, what would be at the singles, right? They're just identifying what the singles are. And, like, very quickly they got the pattern, and they're skip counting all the way up to, and they see that it would be on 100. And so, like, and then seeing, like, all these other different models and how they're getting to it. And I don't know, it's like, the difference in thinking, and then even like seeing, like, how the student work was selected. Because there was one that I thought was pretty brilliant that, I don't know, gets talked about all the time. It was the tens. Like, they identified the tens. That part, shoot, maybe I don't have that here. Yeah, like where the tens would be. Did you with Hector, Isabel, Maria, and Colin? They identified that 10 would be a single. The 20 would be on the right of a 2. The 30 would be the left of a 2, and the right. Like, it's almost like you could just see going around and around in that pattern. Like, I thought that was kind of amazing. Like, I don't know, just to see, like, that's what which makes sense. Like, 10, like, kids, like, 10s are a good number that kids like to talk about, and then seeing where that pattern exists. I don't know.
And 10 is a great number, but I didn't think that was the friendliest number in the situation.
Not for this one. Yeah, exactly.
Right? This one, so a little spoiler alert, the friendlier numbers on this are going to be 3 or maybe even 9 because of the location of the jump. But 10, if you're counting by tens, it's going to be a single step, a left foot or a right foot. Like, it's kind of an unfriendly number here. But
Right.
once you see their pattern, you're like, oh gosh, I could keep going with this one.
Yeah, and to think too, I wouldn't have thought of that. And like it's not as friendly. And they may have, walked around the building to go into the side door, like, but the thing is, all the math that they're doing to get to, to come up with an answer that they did, they can eventually come up with, like, it's like, oh darn, you did more math than what was necessary, versus, like, again, going back to, it's like, how do we make this efficient? Like, efficient is not the goal right now. The thing is to get them to think and understand how to make sense of the problem. And so, again, it's the messiness, right? Confidence in the messiness. And it's like a little bit like, there's an easier way to do that. Like, but this making sense to them. And then that making sense to them is going to help them see how to make sense of it for the other ones too. So
absolutely.
What, if someone was going to check out, and I posted a link to your Mather Days. What's another task, just to give another example of a rich task that you really love that maybe you did on a Mather Days, and we could put a link to.
Yeah, sure. So the link to it, by the way, is theresawells.com/matherdays. And one of my favorite ones is designing a hockey rink. So I used to play a lot of hockey growing up. I actually used to play professional roller hockey.
Nice.
But I played roller, ice, field. I did the trifecta, or the hat trick, as we call it,
yes.
Of hockeys. So the important thing about a hockey rink is that you have only curves. You do not want this awful rink with right angles where a puck's going to get stuck there because somebody's going to get injured. We need to slide that puck around.
Mm-hmm.
That's the important thing. So they design an ice rink. The only stipulation is it can have no angles in it because that's unsafe for hockey players.
Right.
But we can have some really unique ways. We can have like a little area in the middle, so it can be for the enjoyment of skating. But we could also play some hockey on it, or a little stick handling on it. So they start designing these. Now, the reason I'm doing that is I don't want them to break it up into shapes like rectangles and triangles. Mm-hmm. But this is also a very real concept. So we do this problem. I've given this problem to kindergartners, and then they do it on grid paper, and then they try and count how many squares are in there. They're working on counting to 100. So that was their standard. I'll do this one with sixth graders where they are learning how to decompose shapes and find areas inside of it. So they're trying to find the area of this. I'll do this with middle schoolers where they have to find out how much water do you need to flood the rink. And so, funny thing, it's less than an inch of water on that. It does not have that much. But when you find the volume of that for the area, it's kind of surprisingly large. So they'll do that in those grades. And then every time that I've done this, I always get a kiddo who starts decomposing the shapes instead of like a big square where now it's got some edges that you have to cut off. They're like, now let's just make it into multiple rectangles. No, let's make it into really skinny rectangles. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a fundamental theorem of calculus. Like, you're doing it here.
That's right.
So they are breaking up this big, funky, roundish shape into lots of little pieces to get the most accurate area. The reason I bring that one up is I think just about anyone from any grade level can look at that problem and say, oh, that's my standard. And that is an amazingly rich task.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I put a link to Mather Days in the chat so people can jump into those because, again, it's a pretty amazing professional development that you offer for free to anyone that wants to see, and also the backlog of material is one thing to see or to get the task and then to say like, well, how do I put the 5 practices around it, and then you actually get to see that, and then if it applies to your area, you can take it into the next week of class and start putting it into play. So it's just kind of amazing. What cautions do you have with people that are doing like the rich tasks or wanting to use rich tasks, and maybe they've been doing it, but maybe they haven't been doing it to fidelity as you're talking about with the 5 practices?
Yeah. When you get pretty good at it, you start to think maybe I don't have to anticipate. Nope. It doesn't matter how veteran you are. I'm pretty sure Peg Smith would come in here right now and say, like, you better anticipate even if you think you're a pro at this. And that's the biggest caution is It doesn't matter how little time you have, spend the few minutes anticipating, because you are going to get that time back times 10 during the monitoring stage. It's going to make an okay lesson into a great lesson. So that one warning is just, you got to spend the time to anticipate. It's worth it. And then the other thing that's really important to me is thinking about how to use the different representations, especially if you're doing it online, in ways where students can copy and paste to make a whole bunch of things. There's more advantages that aren't there in person.
Mm-hmm.
You might be familiar with base 10 blocks. Yeah. So I'll have kids do some, double-digit multiplication with base 10 blocks. In the in-person class, they run at 100 flats. They don't online. That's right. They learn to make these thousands pieces, these 10,000 pieces, and they just control D it and make duplicates. And so just think about the advantages and disadvantages of doing it online and how that's different than in person.
Yeah, no, that's good. Do you have any, do you have any examples of like when anticipating it sounds like you had like maybe a learning moment there where, ooh, I didn't anticipate and now I'm in a little bit of a pickle. Do you have any examples of that?
Sure. I think the one that comes to mind first is anytime I do something with triangles, there's something about it that I never seem to anticipate enough with triangles. Kids are just really neat about them. I'll think I have something figured out, and then that obtuse one doesn't work. I'm like, oh, I really should have tried that one out. Yeah. So I bring up triangles because it's my own like fun Achilles heel. But just having the chance to anticipate is so important. And then the other thing is when I don't anticipate, I try to make it a little bit, out there. Like, gosh, there were 3 on here today that I did not even think would happen. You all surprised me with these ones. I really want to showcase all of these, but I'm going to try and hold back and just do a couple so we can make some really good connections. But yeah, it's a really important step.
Yeah. But I did like too, when you talked about anticipating and before you talked about, maybe there was someone's thinking that, was, ooh, that was pretty cool. It's kind of outside of the scope, but I'm going to reserve that for another time. And I like that sort of like, again, honoring students thinking, we're going to figure out a place to talk about it. And like, not to say like, we'll find a place to use this brilliant thinking. Don't you worry. So it's like that tabling of that, that thinking for a later time. It provides, I don't know, it gives you some agency as like the teacher to say like, you know what, I don't have to get everything all at once. And also too, to say like, the creativity and might, that I use for this problem, like my teacher's acknowledging it and like, that's cool. But like, yeah, it might not have been right on target for what we're doing today, but that's okay. We're going to get it later and I'm getting what I'm supposed to get out of this task. And like, there's just so many good messages that are sent there too with yes, the confidence in their thinking. And again, going back to that confidence in the messiness, right, of doing these sorts of tasks.
So I work with a lot of pre-service and in-service teachers too. And I bring this up because what you're mentioning there about the other one, I have this little analogy that I bring up. I call those ones my math boyfriend. So you might have been in a situation with a significant other where you are in love with them, but they don't really belong in certain places with you. Like some places you're expected to go maybe professionally by yourself. You don't need to bring your math boyfriend with you. There's some places where it's like, no, just not here. That is the really cool math example that I want to show off. Oh, I want to show it off so bad, but it doesn't fit with this unit. So I have to hold on and wait for the appropriate time to bring that up. So I usually share that with my pre-service teachers, my in-service teachers, and they kind of get that. Okay, I get that a little bit. But my students, the analogy or the situation I'll bring up with them is this one's really cool. This is going up on the wall. So in some cases, it is a printout and it goes up on the wall. In other cases, it goes up on the learning management system as just here's a really cool piece of work we're going to look at. Anyone can have thoughts about it at any time. You can even, maybe we'll do some sticky notes that you can put with it, virtual sticky notes. But we are not actually going to explain this one until Unit 7. and it's going to be a little while away. And so the student realizes, wow, my work is valued. I'm excited because now I don't have to teach all that. Like, they are looking at that ahead of time. That prior knowledge is coming in. And then when it's time to finally bring up that work, I got all their attention. They are waiting for it. Yeah. And so it's just, more student-centered work, but giving them the chance to be the star and to lead up to that excitement of being the star.
And like anticipation of those sorts of things is like, I've got my, I don't know, like treasure chests slides that's like for the chapters coming up or the standards coming up. I'm like, ooh, this is going to a treasure chest that we're going to call it up when we get to chapter 7. It's in the chapter 7 treasure chest. Like, ooh, I'm in the treasure chest.
Exactly. So there's a lot of opportunities, and in the next couple chapters, you're going to be reading these too, where the students, instead of the teacher putting all this work into the planning and finding the good clip art and finding the numbers that they want, instead it's, let's give this responsibility to the students. Now I look at the 30 that are here and I say, oh gosh, these are all great. I'm going to pick this one and this one and this one and this one for this week, and my planning is done. Thank you. And you named the children specifically for who contributed that one. It's more of them being the creators. It's more of them being the developers, and it's still using my teacher brain because I'm running the show. It is not a free for all. It is very much aligned with the standards. I'm getting a point across. They are being connected, but that doesn't mean I don't have to use student work. So that's coming up.
I'm excited about that. One of my favorite articles is don't say anything a kid can say. I mean, and so it's like, now I can see, what your spin is on it. Like in this environment.
Don't plan anything. A kid can do better, because you know what? They're already better YouTubers. And I don't care what grade you teach. That's the case. Yeah. They're already looking at things and can take pictures on phones at better and cooler angles than we're going to do. And so it's all about kind of harnessing that and realizing that when they're the creators, they're seeing the math in their world. They're, applying it. They're going to be the ones on the star stage. And you are turning more and more into from a teacher, from a lecturer, into a facilitator or a conductor. You're just picking the next person, saying, all right, you go, and boom.
Yeah. So I used to work at a brewery up in Wisconsin. There's lots of those up there. And the brewmaster would just say, I'm just creating environments for good stuff to happen. And like, that facilitating, like creating these environments and like building the relationships and setting the and putting the tools out there, finding rich talent, anticipating, like all this sorts of things, like good stuff's going to happen. And so I'm excited for that for next week. So yes, next week is our last of these chats. Then we're going to do a culminating episode on the Teaching Math Teaching podcast. But I think like we got a nice preview of that, of our thing. Anything else that you want to end on as we're wrapping up our hour here together?
Maybe ending with, if we want kids to make mistakes, these messy problems, we want them to put it out there, ask yourself what mistakes you can showcase in the next week. For me, it's, when I'm on Math Days on Saturday, or even when I'm, just working with kiddos casually, it's just like, oh, I've made that mistake. I'm going to own it. We're going to enjoy it. I'm learning something new with technology. And this is just a normal part of our day to day. This is what learning looks like. And so, the more we do that, and boy, do we have the opportunity with technology these days, right? Yeah. The more we can showcase that we can slow down and calm down and enjoy it, the more they're going to do it.
Yeah. And creating that environment for like, we're all learning, and we're all learning, we're all growing, we're all getting better together. But yeah, that's a good message to end on. Well, Theresa, I appreciate your time. I appreciate all that you've done. And again, it feels like, this book is like, it has hyperlinks to all these different ideas. We already talked. How many different books? We almost have like a citation list of all these different books that I think are connected to this book. And so it's pretty awesome. And all the opportunities, we put all the links to Mather Days and your website and all the resources. And if you've not checked that out, please, it's worth it. Go check it out. And then we'll be here next week. So appreciate it. So thank you, Theresa. Thank you for your time. And looking forward to our final chat coming up next week. Same time.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you.